It was my dream.
Sometimes, to do what's right, we have to be steady and give up the thing we want the most, even our dreams.
Spider-Man 2 can essentially be considered two things. When you watch it as a kid or a young adult, it's one of the best and most fun action movies you can watch. Dr. Octopus is a great villain, the action scenes and choreography has improved, and it's absolutely top-notch. The train fight sequence remains one of the best action sequences ever put on screen, bar none. And the shared moment between the citizens of New York and Spider-Man when they found out his identity is a very heartwarming moment too. In my opinion, it was a better scene than the New Yorkers on the bridge scene in Spider-Man 1. But as I became an adult and I watched it again, the movie is simply a classic tragedy disguised as a feel-good action movie. And I think that's the reason why it's considered one of the best films of all time, because humans tend to love tragedies. The movie is a tragedy in the vein of movies like Godfather 2, and it can be considered as a cautionary tale on the cost of getting what we think we want. It elicits the feeling of seeing the ending of Michael Corleone gets at the end of Godfather 2. You see, after all his enemies have been defeated and he has won his supposed victory, he becomes an old man with nothing. And it tells you that sometimes getting what you want is not really what you think you want. And as a side note, they should have never made Godfather 3 as it ruined the series. And the irony is, the same can be said about Raimi's Spider-Man 3 to an extent. The truth of the matter is this: the story of Spider-Man 2 is a cautionary tale on obsession, and this tale is told from the perspective of four main characters: Peter Parker, Otto Octavius, Harry Osborne, and Mary Jane Watson. The movie, by focusing on these four characters and their story arcs, leaves behind its contest for existing, which is being a comic book movie, and transcends into a story that is timeless in every way. You can watch this movie 50 years from now, and that message will still be relevant. Even 100 years from now, if it still exists, you will always get that message out of it. It's the story of human obsession, love, sacrifice, and the cost of getting what we want, and that is what makes it so timeless. Now let me ask you one simple question, human to human. Which one of us does not have a dream they want to achieve or an obsession they want to go after? Well, obviously this is a rhetorical question because no such person exists nor will ever exist. Even Buddha himself and the monks that follow in his footsteps are seeking enlightenment, which can be regarded as their obsession, and they will never admit to that. It is then no secret that all great human stories tend to address this nature of humans in one aspect or another. From literature like Homer's The Odyssey and the Iliad to movies like Citizen Kane and Casablanca. I simply have no qualms in saying that this is my favorite comic book film of all time, and also one of my favorite films in general. And considering the sheer amount of quality comic book films that we have had, this statement is not a simple one to make. I simply do not know how Raimi achieved this feat, but he did. What he accomplished in the first film was great, especially in regards to the characters and their growth in that movie. But what he manages to accomplish here exceeded that already high bar. I will not be talking about action set pieces in this analysis. I'll be fully focused on the characters and their journey through this movie. We will discuss where it leads for some of them, where it ends for some of them, and the realization that is made by nearly all of them in the lead up to the third movie. But before we begin, please don't let me spoil this movie for you if you have not watched it. Go find this movie and give it a watch. And for those that have already watched this movie, I hope you will join me as we analyze this film as it's intended to be, through the actions of its core characters. Now let's begin. So in this film, Peter Parker has been Spider-Man for 3 years. If you remember his choice in the last movie, he fell in love with MJ to embrace this responsibility. Unfortunately for Peter, life sucks now and being Spider-Man isn't all that he thought he would be. His professional and personal life is falling apart, his work as Spider-Man goes unappreciated on account of J. Jonah Jameson, and on top of all that, his best friend Harry kind of hates him. This stems from the fact that Norman Osborn, who was the Green Goblin, died while fighting Spider-Man, and Harry Osborn seems to think that Spider-Man killed him. And as Peter is supposed to be the designated photographer of Spider-Man, Harry is certain Peter knows who Spider-Man is and won't tell him. Ignorance is bliss sometimes, but more on that later. The problems begin for Peter when he finds out that Mary Jane has achieved her dream of being an actress on stage and is also seeing someone. This information shatters Peter's confidence since Mary Jane has literally been his obsession since childhood and he could have had a life with her. But he walked away from that for his current life, which is going nowhere. The self-doubt begins to affect his powers. But things are not all bad yet, as Peter, with the help of Harry Osborn, gets to meet his idol Otto Octavius. Now, Octavius is already an accomplished scientist, and you get the feeling that this is who Peter would be if he was not Spider-Man. But Octavius is also a man of obsession, and he has dedicated his life to achieving nuclear fusion, which he is on the cusp of achieving. Yes, there is no doubt that he is brilliant, but he is also egotistical, and he refuses to acknowledge the possibility that his experiment may have flaws in it. So of course the experiment goes wrong, and his refusal to give up on it causes the death of his wife. It also destroys the neural inhibitor on his advanced extra appendages, which gains control of his mind, feeding into his darker obsessions of completing the experiment at any cost. Now keep in mind that the experiment was only successfully shut down due to Spider-Man literally pulling the plug, which prevented more people from being harmed. Now at any point during the experiment going wrong, Octavius himself could have pulled the plug and prevented what happened there, but he doesn't. The irony is, this scenario is the reason why he built those arms in the first place. This is the sunk cost fallacy. The tendency that the more we invest into something, the less eager we are to let that thing go or cut our losses. But oftentimes, the best thing to do is to let it go, and in the failure to do so, it cost him the life of his partner and wife, which leaves him in an abyss. Now oftentimes when people are in dark places, for instance with addiction, we tend to keep going deeper into the abyss because unfortunately, we stop being able to see the exit. This is the place where Otto is after losing everything that he has worked for. In his warped mind, his only shot at redemption is to rebuild the machine and complete his experiment successfully. It's to justify for himself that he had not made a mistake, but we as the audience know that he did. Octavius becoming the villain, robbing banks and harming people, is not something he does out of malice. It's simply his means of fulfilling the last obsession he has left, and anyone that gets in the way of that obsession is his direct enemy. So as he does in this movie, he now has to fight Spider-Man, and to do that, he has to keep embracing the darkness, sinking ever deeper. Peter Parker himself in this film has his own dilemma to resolve, and it is an inverse to Octavius. While Octavius gains power due to his obsession, Peter is losing power due to his own obsession. His decision to walk away from Mary Jane was the right choice in the first place. I know comic book wise, it won't make any sense due to MJ being his everything there, but in this movie, it is hinted to us many times that Peter doesn't even have his life together, so to go into a relationship will be a mistake. It's Peter's inability to let go of the idea of Mary Jane that causes him to begin to wish for a normal life. This is the crux of him losing his abilities. You cannot focus on the present while dwelling on the past, and he is missing the big picture that Otto Octavius is a bigger threat than anyone that he has fought to this point. This then comes back to bite him when Octavius kidnaps Mary Jane to force Peter to send Spider-Man his way. It's when Peter finally resolves himself to be Octavius that he regains his abilities as Spider-Man. Now throughout this movie as well, you are shown the result of some minor characters also getting what they think they want. J. Jonah Jameson has always wanted Spider-Man gone, and in this film he gets his wish. But he quickly realizes that this was a mistake as things were better with him around. Furthermore, Spider-Man was his actual motivation for doing his job in the first place, so he loses the fire in him when Peter retires. This is also why he is low-key happy when Spider-Man regains his powers and steals his suit back. Aunt May has not been able to let go of how Uncle Ben died and blame herself. When she finally gets a confession from Peter about the circumstances in which he died, how Peter is perceived in her eyes changes. But I would mention that Peter only makes his confession in an effort to let Aunt May stop blaming herself and blame him instead. He was also always feeling guilty about it, which I would note was another reason why he was having problems with his powers in the first place. This line delivered by Peter,
Uncle Ben was killed that night for being the only one who did the right thing,
hits hard whenever I watched this film as a kid. But the silver lining to all of this before the resolution of the movie is that both of them have been able to heal and get past it. Again, the theme of letting go is hinted at here. This then brings us to the final conflict of the movie and how it is resolved, and it's not through a big fight. This film is resolved with our main character simply talking. Peter reveals his identity to Octavius, allowing the two to sit and talk about the implications of the experiment and what it would do if the current experiment keeps on self-sustaining. This simple conversation is what allows Octavius to see the flaws in his actions and resolve himself to destroy that experiment, finally giving up on his succession. The final line in the film that he delivers,
I will not die a monster,
tells the audience that his resolve to do the right thing is certain which he succeeds in doing. Sure, it cost him his life, but sometimes that's the price of letting go. This is also why Peter finally confesses to Mary Jane about his true feelings for her. It was his way of letting her go, as he has resolved himself to being Spider-Man for the greater good. But we all know that's not how the movie ends, and that will lead to his own issues in part 3. As a side note, hearing Octavius and Spider-Man deliver the lines,
Power of the sun.
In the palm of your hand.
was such a fulfilling scene for me. I always like to hope that since they have now seen the arc reactor, they will now collaborate to build something similar when they returned. Yes, my inner child can also dream. Unfortunately, not every character is able to let go, and this is mostly true in the case of Harry Osborne and Mary Jane. Now, I should mention that Oscorp was the bankroller for Otto's experiment, and with its implosion, so is Harry's dream of building an empire like his father. This state of affairs plunges him into darkness, and in his perspective, Spider-Man has ruined his life twice now. This mind state leads him to verbally and physically assault Peter, which destroys their friendship. And we start to see glimpses of the Goblin personality awakening in him with the decisions that he goes on to make in this movie. Harry's obsession with Spider-Man drives him to put a hit out on him, with Octavius being the person chosen to do this. The payment for this job is more of the same substance that was used for the nuclear fusion experiment, which failed. This also means that by giving Otto more of it, Harry is willingly letting innocent people possibly die as long as he gets his revenge. Furthermore, Harry Osborne, by giving Peter Parker as the person Octavius can force to give up the identity of Spider-Man, indirectly puts Mary Jane in danger here as well. But he simply does not consider this, as he is stuck in his own pit of anger and self-loathing and can't see the bigger picture. But when Otto delivers Spider-Man and he finds out that it's Peter, his mind is shattered by this revelation. This is why he hallucinates his father's ghost, telling him to seek revenge. And no, it's not because the Green Goblin is a spirit now. Finding out his father's Goblin armory/secret lab was simply a coincidence. That moment of revelation was meant to show him who his father really was. But unfortunately for Harry, his mind is too far gone at this point, and frankly he has nothing more to lose. So the choice he makes here will also have repercussions in the next story. Mary Jane's story is also a bit of tragedy that will carry over to the next film, and don't be fooled by the running away to Peter's arms in a wedding gown scene. I mentioned in the previous video that Mary Jane was infatuated with Spider-Man, but it was Peter that she fell in love with, and by the end of that movie, she gets her suspicions that Peter is actually Spider-Man. Well, in this film, she allows this obsession to rule her choices, and by the end of this movie, she makes one of the worst decisions anybody can ever make. Mary Jane had a dream of being an actress. Well, she gets her wish in this movie, only to find out that she is terrible at it. But life is not all bad, as she is dating an accomplished astronaut who also happens to be the son of J. Jonah Jameson, and there are even plans for a wedding. Anyone would be happy at this prospect, but not Mary Jane. You see, she is also obsessed that Peter is hiding a secret from her, and she is certain that he is Spider-Man. This then means that rather than focusing on the life that she has been able to build with her own efforts, she is still hung up on knowing Peter's secret. But this situation is not entirely one-sided, as it's also fueled by Parker's own obsession with Mary Jane to a point. When Peter loses his powers as Spider-Man, he commits entirely to winning back Mary Jane, which does more harm than good, as it also sends mixed messages. This pull and push drags both of them into the tragedy they end up in by the third movie, but more on that later. When Mary Jane is captured by Octavius and is saved by Spider-Man, she finally gets the truth about Peter. Peter acknowledges that he does love her, but reaffirms that his responsibility as Spider-Man is a necessity. The scene that follows this revelation and admission is one that most people at the time thought was romantic, but I honestly thought it was an incredibly foolish choice by both people. Mary Jane runs away from her own wedding to tell Peter that he is the only one that she loves. It might sound like a romantic moment and the good guy finally getting the girl, but it's actually not. Because right after this kiss, Peter hears police sirens going off and he is Spider-Man, so he has to go and help out. Mary Jane then gives him the classic line, "Go get him, Tiger," which is supposed to signal her support for him. Well, the frame this entire scene ends on speaks a million words, as it's simply Mary Jane in a wedding dress standing in a small New York apartment, alone. It tells the audience that she has made a mistake, with unknown repercussions in the future. Don't get me wrong, she has got what she wanted, a life with Peter Parker, but she will never be the first woman in his life. Being a hero is the first woman in Peter's life. She is instead destroyed her career, walked away from the person that would have put her first, only to obtain an obsession. It also subtly tells the audience that this is not a happy ending they were expecting, and it will be made more evident in the third movie. Now, I don't think a time will ever come where my feelings regarding this movie will ever change, because I have carried these same thoughts and opinions with me since I was 14, and it's reaffirmed every time I rewatch this movie. This movie to me is perfection, but unfortunately, anything that attains a peak will inevitably fall, and the movie that we got as a third part for the Raimi saga was, in my opinion, not that good. My reason for this was not that the execution of the movie was poor or anything, far from it, but the Spider-Man 3 that was released feels like the first time Sony Pictures really started dipping their fingers into the Spider-Man creative pot, and it shows. There are some elements of that movie that worked extremely well, and others that did not work at all, but hopefully, we can discuss more about that when I decide to tackle that film in a not so distant future. But Spider-Man 2, on the other hand, remains an absolute classic, and I wish more people will remember it as the years go by. Because in my humble opinion, it's one of those movies that has cemented itself in film history permanently. Watch this film if you haven't, because it will definitely be worth your time. Till next time, friends.